Welcome to the Athletes in Motion podcast, from race to recovery, with your hosts, Tom Riegel and Kenny Bailey.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Kenny, how are you?
I am fantastic. Welcome to the show. We have Dr. Jeffrey Suppinger.
Welcome.
To be a family practice?
Yes.
All right.
Family practice.
But more importantly, a runner, and a very fast one at that. We hate you for that. Thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you.
We understand that you just you did Leadville this year, was sort of your bucket list item that you finally did. So you traditionally were a marathon runner, right?
Yes.
And then you decided, the heck with it, I'm just going to start going 100 miles.
I had a friend that said, I had done, yes. Well, that's summing it up quite quickly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And there we go.
No, I did. I've done a lot of marathon running. Got into ultras in the last 5 years, ran more and more. I had a friend that says, why don't you do this? There's lots more background, but I finally said, sure, I'll do it. Trained a lot and did it, and it was one of the best races I ever did.
Cool.
So before we go down that path,
So take us back to, how'd you get into running?
You were 8 years old. You were eating waffles. What made you decide to start running?
So it's interesting thinking about this. Well, one thing I remember as far as running, I grew up at the time. So I'm 49 years old. Mm-hmm. I grew up at the time where Mark Allen. The big Hawaii Ironman stuff. I remember getting Nike trainer shoes where you got there was a circle and you had to put your time on 3 different sports and see if it was an equilateral triangle. I don't know if you got
really?
that on
I did not know that.
I did not know
did
that.
You never
one.
see that? That was on a cross trainer shoe from way back.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
So I remember, I guess first time running, my soccer coach said, "Go, you got to run 2 miles in less than 15 minutes," and I trained and did that easily. And I might have been the second fastest guy on the soccer team, not the second best.
second fastest.
But I was second fastest.
You take what you can.
I take what you can. So
did kick for hell.
It wasn't very good, but so I did that, and I was always good at endurance sports from the beginning. I was way better at endurance sports, and so did that. Played soccer and other sports, but then, first running. I probably did a few events in college, but then in medical school, I kind of coming off of that, remembering the Ironman triathlons, I did half Ironman.
Nice.
By simply reading a book.
Excellent.
Nice.
I read a book.
I did not know that. You did. Where did you
at Blackwater Eagleman.
Well, look at you.
Oh, okay.
Because I grew up on the eastern shore of Maryland, so
okay.
I got a book. I mean, this is as nerdy as it can be. I got a book, didn't know what I was doing, didn't have anyone to train with. I was basically trying to survive my first year of medical school. And
you had enough stress, right?
Trained in a pool, didn't know how to do open water swimming, but I did the race.
There you go.
Finished it. Was way better at the running than anything else. Got through. Did some things. Probably rode my bike a lot more when I was young, and even I did my residency in the University of Colorado in Denver. So
there you go.
Yeah. Did a lot more mountain biking. Riding.
So your lungs just basically blew up when you're. I was going to say you're already doing endurance, and you're already.
So I love that.
So just add a layer of huge lungs to go with it.
Did a couple of that. So I finished my residency. Probably did more riding. Was interested in cycling, and then came back. Started working here in Tennessee, and then did probably more. Well, actually, at the very end, Dr. Mark Cucuzzella, who's has a book out, and he's for barefoot running and so forth. He was my residency instructor at the University of Colorado.
Oh, that's cool.
So he said, Jeff, you should run a marathon. I ran first marathon, Steamboat, Colorado.
Oh, nice.
Right at finishing my residency. So I did my first marathon in 2003, and then came here, started working, probably did more cycling, and then I ran another marathon. I remember I trained for 2004 in New York. Hurt myself. Surprising. That's kind of how it starts. Couldn't run the race, but went out there, and I had a friend that was living in New York City, and what I remember is hanging around the south side of Central Park, and so I'm guessing these guys are like 2:40 finishers. They're pretty fast.
Yeah.
There's a person coming through. I'm walking with my wife. I see a guy come around the corner, stop, vomit on a tree. And
then you're saying that's for me.
And then he wiped his mouth off
and kept running.
And he kept running. I said, I got to do this.
I got to do this. I'm not doing it right. I got to do it.
Do this. So 2005, I did the race, and then so I did New York in 2005, my second, and then it was faster than my first. I was within, not very far from qualifying for Boston, which was easier then.
Yeah.
And then so I ran my third race and qualified for Boston. That led to running a bunch of marathons. So I did a bunch of that. So that's kind of the...
Yeah, so when...
Gifted for the endurance run, for sure.
Yeah, gifted for the endurance run.
Well, yeah, and then you moved to Colorado and just, do high altitude training for a while. So it sounds like you were doing a lot of athletics during your residency.
Yep.
And was it something where you found it to just be an escape, or it's just an extension, if you will?
Probably both. Thinking about this, it's for me probably both.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's probably a good compensatory, healthy escape, like coping mechanism.
Yeah.
But it's become a little bit of who I am and what I enjoy, and it's not just. I mean, it's enjoyable.
I guess from a mindset standpoint, it's like some people are like, I got to go train. I have to go train versus you just need to get out and do something physical. So you've been racking your brain all day.
Good out and do something physical. Yeah. It's healthy. Yes. I always has found it. Well, actually, I should go back and tell one other story that I have found myself even telling patients. I remember the moment I was 24 years old. It was the second year. It was the third year of medical school. The first 2 years you spend mostly in classrooms. The third year I had spent my first 2-month rotation in the hospital. So we're at an inner city hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. And, sleeping poorly, eating Chinese food. I was probably 15 to 20 pounds heavier than I am today. 15 pounds, let's say. Worst shape of my life. Yeah. And I was...
Which is still 50 pounds lighter than me, just so you know.
And I tell you...
I hate you guys.
And it was surrounded by, I have to say, I was surrounded by lots of unhealthy individuals. Oh, yeah. And I say unhealthy in a lot of different ways, psychologically, physically, everything. And people that looked older than they needed to look, and including some of, people in medicine, per se. I came home from that 2-month rotation exhausted, ran 2 miles in the Highlands in Atlanta. I was exhausted, tired. I was out of shape. And I remember that moment because I said, this isn't going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Like I said,
I'm not going to be like that.
This is not happening. And from that point forward, I can't, through different things, I've not always been in race condition and top shape.
Sure.
But I've never been a mess.
That
but
bad.
yeah, you didn't start take up smoking and drinking. Just other
stress release.
That's right.
Releases,
right. Yeah, I said I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to maintain my weight. And I'm going to stay fit. So that was kind of the beginning of it. And then that was a while ago. And then since I've gone on.
Yeah.
So, and so to answer your question, it's like I just enjoy being active. It's become fun. And then all these now it's adventures. When you talk about ultras and other stuff in Leadville, it's like,
well, now you're pushing yourself. That's what I was always found. You're always just pushing yourself just a little bit further. Can I do that? What about that? You have a friend that says, hey, why don't we go do this exciting experiment or whatever? And you're like, oh, okay, I'll try.
Yeah, that's
right.
Why
not?
And when you're younger, I think this is typical. Like at first it was like, okay, I run a little faster. I get into Boston. And then it was a couple races later. I was like, I want to break. I did a time barrier I wanted to break, and then I break 3 hours. I was going to say it. I broke 3 hours, which I was real proud of. It took a couple times.
No, that's fantastic.
And I failed a few times.
Sure.
And then later I wanted to see a PR. Well, I think the PR was 10 years ago. I don't think it's coming again.
Let's be honest.
Well, that's why you start going longer, right?
And then we say well, okay.
That's my excuse. I'm not that fast, so I'm just going to go a little longer.
I think to your point, though, it sounds like, and I think all three of us are the same way. It's just, I need something that slightly scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Right. And to your point, it was running the marathon. Well, I've conquered that. It was Boston. Okay, I've conquered that. Right. It's like, well, that's not going to scare me anymore.
Yeah.
Because I remember you and I were talking. You were like, and tell me if this is true, because it really pisses me off if it's true. It's like, within 3 minutes of what your time's going to be. Like, I think you were telling me, like, I don't know if I should just push on this run, because I may, I could get under 3, but should I get under 3? And you were like off by 3 or 4 minutes. I'm rather not, finishing or not finishing is number one for me, right? 4 hours would be a dream, but, not being completely, my calf not blowing up in the middle of a race would be awesome. But, within minutes, like that's how kind of in tune you are when it comes to these marathons.
Yeah,
right?
I'd done enough to where that's kind of where I got to. And, you could argue, but maybe I could be pushing harder and going faster.
But you know yourself.
But
right?
I knew myself. I knew what I did, knew my plan, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
Well, the idea is not to get hurt.
that's right.
I mean, you have family, you have other responsibilities, you have patients to take care of. Like, you can't just like kill yourself out there and
but it
ruin
seems like
so.
a fairly disciplined person, though. Just by your nature, you seem to be
Disciplined and consistent. I think the key is consistency. Like,
that's a really good point.
Yes, completely consistent.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're bored with the marathons. You're like, any fool can run one of those. Was
You?
it?
Yeah.
Have you done trail running before? Is it something? Because to me, I love trail running. Because the idea is that your clock gets to be put back there.
Oh
and
yeah,
you just kind of go.
like
enjoy
I think the first one was maybe 16 or 17. I started. Yeah, I think one was in 16. I ran the Music City.
Okay.
And I think this is the one. I have a great picture that it's at the front of it. You can see David Goggins in the front of the picture with his shirt off.
Of course, he's allergic to cotton.
He's like, and you see me kind of in the background. You can see me, and I was like saying, "Can you tell the difference?" So that was a 16 race. Here was a 50K. So I did some 50Ks, and I think I did one of the Natchez Trace has a race, and their first race, their inaugural race, was a 43 miler.
Oh, wow!
So that was the first long one.
Okay.
I've since done a couple other 50s, like a Tunnel Hill and Natchez Trace. So I've done a couple of those, and the trail runs became, to your point, at some point you're not going to get any. I'm not going to get any faster.
Yeah.
Chasing that has lost its. It's not as exciting anymore.
Yeah.
Running in the woods reminds me of being a kid playing.
Yeah.
I get to play in the woods, and
Yeah.
that's one thing the race director at Leadville said. They said, how can all of us tomorrow get at least a day to play in the woods like kids?
And the pressure's off, right? Because of the terrain, because of what you're doing.
Yeah.
One of the first times I remember, I think I did a 25K, and it was like trail running, and people were walking up a hill. Like, you can do that, right? Because they know that if you blow it, you can run up that hill, but you're done for the day. So just the whole notion of you just throw your watch away, and you just like you said, you enjoy what you're doing, and you go out.
And road runners I know will say, well, what's your pace? What are you going to
exactly,
do?
right? And
I say, you don't get it.
You don't get it.
The pace is dictated by is there a tree in front of me that I have to crawl over?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Right?
or is it slick?
There's so many people on the ultras that go off so hard in the beginning. Stories of people just blowing up, 10, 20 miles in, all of a sudden realizing that, I was going too fast. Like, you got a long day ahead of you.
And did you have to adjust yourself on that when you were doing that, or did you kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I would say absolutely. At first, you go. It's like I knew how to. Because you internally know. We all know if we're running a 5-mile run, 10-mile run, or doing a 20-mile trail run. You kind of know internally how hard to go, or if you're running a marathon. Well, I was pretty good at knowing how to last 26 miles. And then first time I had to do 50K, it's like mile 28. You're like, geez, I'm a mess.
What the heck is going on?
Like, it's too hard. So yes, absolutely. And I don't know if you ever. I mean, I guess I've had moments where I said this was really great, but I mean, I just ran after Leadville. I ran a 50-miler. Was it 2 months later? It was whenever the Natchez Trace was. And, I thought it was recovered, probably mostly was, but paced great for like a 55K.
Not quite enough.
And then it got really hard, and I was like, that's part of the game. You slow down, you adjust. And,
highs and lows, where you just get through it.
And I got through it. It was fine. So
so I guess that's what I wanted to talk to both of you about, because you both have done 100 milers this year, and I have no desire whatsoever to do that. So
you should. It's kind of fun.
I actually want to do rim to rim, but we'll talk.
Yeah.
So to your point, there's a time like, okay, you're comfortable with 20, 30 miles, right? You're training for 100. At what point does it get like, does 50 get weird? Does 60 get weird? When do things like, because I know you said you started hallucinating on your first
on the first
mile.
one, yeah.
Like the bushes turned into rabbits and
we had all sorts of great stuff. But I was looking back at that. I had a lot of mental stress the week before. Dogs got sick. We lost one. On the Monday before the race was on Friday.
Yeah.
So the second one got sick right after and was in the hospital, got released from the hospital the day I was driving out to the race. Almost didn't go to the race because it was that much craziness going on. Got out there, wasn't sure I was going to have the will to do the race. My first 100 miler, 14,000 feet of climbing, It was out there. We were trying to figure this out, and it was like, so I got through it. The sun started coming up in the morning, and I'm, almost 24 hours into this race, and that's when like my mind started to do funky stuff. Like leaves started to take on forms. I saw boats. I saw Demon Child. I saw a bunch of stuff, and I was just like, I kind of absorbed it, and I said, okay, I know what's going on.
Yep.
And then I just kind of enjoyed it. Because it was like, okay, this is pretty wild. I mean, there's no way there's a boat out here. There's no river. What's going on? Yeah. And I kind of went through that, and I met a few other people we were running with were having that issue. This year, did it again, opposite direction, no stress, no extra stress, whatever, no hallucinations, nothing. It was perfect. I had a perfect plan.
So. Well, for me, I did pretty well. One thing that went really well for me is my nutrition. And so there was only one moment, it was probably mile 85 in that range, where I was maybe a little behind, and it was completely dark. And my part of this, if we go through the race, I'll kind of walk through this, but my vision wasn't great at the time. And I swore I might have stepped on a rabbit, and my pacer looked at me. He's like, I stepped on a rabbit. He's like, that's someone poured some water on the ground.
You're cool. Yeah.
You're okay. So there was that moment. But the one other thing I can think of is that I had, in my reading and preparation, and I listened to podcasts and did some reading and so forth, then I experienced this, and I thought it was the most interesting thing. It was more, I did the Strolling Gym 40 miler.
Okay.
So it's a race in Tennessee. And I had read about, if you start getting dark and negative, you might be hypoglycemic and need to eat.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, so every single race I must be.
So anyway,
that makes sense.
So I remember there was one moment where, like, and I think it was interesting to me because it was really astonishing how, how specific this was. I started getting really negative, and it's like I was in mile 30s, and I was like, why am I here? What a waste of a Saturday. What am I doing? And I was like, this isn't me. But those thoughts were creeping in, and I said, I think I need to eat. So that's emotionally, I retained control. Didn't go down that path, and I just drank a bunch. I forget if I had some Spring Energy, or I drank a bunch of something at the next aid, and then within 5 minutes it came back. And it's like
Snickers was right.
I'm saying that this is the Snickers
you are a
commercial
Snickers
completely.
commercial.
You came out of that thing. So so it was like, so I had kind of had some experiences in training with that.
Well, that's kind of interesting, right? Because you just learn a little something from every race, right?
Yeah.
So even if they're like, that was what, a 30 miler?
It was 40,
40. So in relative terms,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that much over, but you learned quite a bit, and you keep picking up these little, nuggets of information to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So what Leadville to me, I think is it not knowing it feels like it's one of it's a Boston Marathon version, right? Leadville's it's like New York, Boston.
Yeah, it's in the top races. I mean, it's at altitude. I mean, it's at 11,000 feet. What 10.5 is when Leadville is.
Can you just sign up for it, or do you have to have like a pedigree to
I guess there's probably a handful of people that get in. You can you can get in a lottery. There's some people that get in through the gym because it's sponsored by Lifetime.
Oh, no kidding.
And there's probably a handful of people that get a handful of people that probably get invited because they win or win some other events. But generally,
Goggins will get in because he's Goggins.
Because he'll helicopter in, and jump out of a plane, and
wrestle a bear, and then start. Right?
But I think there's a lot of part of the reason the low finisher rate is because there's a lot of first timers. And I think this year the finisher rate was like 44%. And part of it's first timers, where a lot of some of the other big 100-milers require previous, you have to get in lotteries with previous entries or qualifiers.
You have to have some qualifying races to get you into that.
But it was the 40th year this year.
Oh, no kidding. That's
which is
that's amazing.
Which is a while. So I think Western States coming up is going to be 50th year. But as far
Western States is the granddaddy, and Leadville's right behind it.
So like these are, we're neither
for the U.S. races, Hard Rock. You've got Western States definitely up there. Leadville is way up in that. And they have the whole Leadman series, so you can do the half iron or the half marathon. A 50-miler?
They're 50-miler, a marathon. They have a 100-mile mountain bike.
Yeah.
They might have another mountain bike too that's shorter.
Yeah, I think there's a shorter mountain bike as well. If you do all 5 events in 1 year, you get the Leadman, thing.
Isn't
which
it
is
funny how stupid we are? When
it's crazy. It's like a pickaxe or something. It's a miner's pickaxe, which is I have a friend who's done it, so it's just kind of
like the Dopey Challenge in Disney. You get more
Yeah.
medals than Phelps, right?
Yeah.
I did a double century bike ride and we did it 1 year. But if you did 3 of them, you get a jersey. And we're like, well, we got to do that. So we did 3 double centuries. And then the 5 double centuries, you get a gold band.
Nice.
And I'm like, well, we got to have a gold band. I mean, come on, right?
Yeah.
It's just the dumbest
Well,
damn
that's
thing.
why I went back to the No Business 100 was because if you do both directions, you get an extra buckle, like a bigger buckle. Well, you got
Isn't that the
a
most
buckle
insane
for
thing?
finishing. So I have 2 buckles just for finishing 1 year and then the next year. And then I got the double buckle, which is almost the size of both of them. It's massive.
Well,
I'm wearing it to a family wedding in January.
Yeah. I mean, I was
be
doing
awesome.
amateur road racing, right? We're doing criteriums, right? And in order to keep the pace up, what they do is they do preems or premium laps, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the preems was like a 6-pack of beer. So you got these weekend warriors going 35, 40 miles an hour, just, and the joke is for any those races, 2 people are going to go home in an ambulance. You don't want to be you, right? So you're doing a preem, you're going like crazy. You've trained like hell to get a 6-pack of beer. It's like the most insane thing we do just for.
Was there a
I
race?
got a buckle.
There was a race
And
that
nobody,
gave out a sleeve of Oreos.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah,
remember
it was just
what
like-
it was. You got a sleeve of Oreos.
But
I'm
isn't
like,
that
well,
funny?
I'd go
But the
for
people
that.
that know when they see the buckle, it's sort of like, oh,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So when you get
yeah.
done with Leadville and they see that, they're like,
buckle.
oh, you're not messing around.
Well,
Like,
that's what kept me. That was my.
That's the draw.
That's my my number 1 goal was to finish.
Yeah.
And my second goal was to get the bigger buckle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I take it you under a certain time you get a bigger buckle.
you get a bigger buckle.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like Norseman, you get the black T-shirt or the white T-shirt, right? If you do,
That's funny.
So
So how did you get in? Did you get in through
Okay,
lottery?
I got in. I got in through the gym.
Okay.
And so, which they had I think if you've been a member of the Lifetime Gym, which is a gym that's real close to the office and right here in the area locally, then they let a certain amount of people in. I don't know how many people get in that way. And then
How much did you throw their way?
oh, yeah.
You left an envelope, didn't you?
No.
Maybe
many
that
years
honey
have
was
you
there.
been a member?
Me and Benjamin Franklin think we really need to get in this race. I'm just saying. I don't know where that envelope came from, sir. I don't know.
I don't know.
It's not mine.
So
yours, though.
I got in that way, which was great. There was a window, and anyway, so
how many months did you want to? Was it between sign up and training?
It was the sign up. I think it was around the New Year. It was around January.
And the races when?
And the race is August. It was I think August 19th this
So
year.
you started January training.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it, and one thing, again, prep. When I think about prepping for this, the prep has probably been everything I've ever done.
Yeah.
You're right.
You're consistent with your training year over year, so this builds to this. So it's
you-
just a matter of specific training for this
you think a
race.
specific thing, but you think all the stuff. And one thing I did in the fall that was kind of a game is I said, well, I want to put in more miles and just see if I can run more big events close to each other and tolerate it. So I ran the Natchez Trace Marathon, which is a trail marathon. I ran the one in Percy Warner, Flying Monkey.
The Flying Monkey,
2 weeks later.
It's a great name for a marathon.
And then 3 weeks later, I did a 50K in
Awesome.
Montgomery Bell.
Okay.
And I just approached those all just went slower.
Yeah.
Like I kind of put my hat down like this.
And that's hard
yeah.
for you. Is that a hard thing to do?
It
Must be because you're running like sub threes. And
Well,
it's just like,
it was a little more difficult, but like when you start thinking of that, it wasn't that difficult. I just said, I got to run this like a training run because I want to run another marathon in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I figured out that I could.
Yeah.
But I just had to go significantly slower. Like my marathon time on that thing was 40 minutes slower than I had run a couple years before. But a trail marathon, I just slowed down a lot.
Yeah.
So and then I did the next one and ran it slower than I probably could have, and then ran the 50K. And so that kind of was my.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I think I can like run Leadville. That was kind of my like, okay, if I could do this, maybe.
Yeah.
So then I started and then I started putting some miles in. I like downhill skiing, so I went on a couple ski trips, and my number one goal through that was like, okay, people say, well, what about your Leadville training? I said, well, first thing is I need to not get injured.
Yeah.
So, when I
check.
check. So when I put my skis up at the end of the winter,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, Check. Number one done.
Yeah.
You're very much a list guy.
Good.
He loves a list.
I like the list.
There's
So,
not
yeah.
a list you don't. When your
like
wife gives you like a grocery list, are you like giddy? It's like,
Get excited.
look at that, I got a list.
He
got a list.
alphabetizes
I got
it,
everything
puts
on
it
the
in
list.
right
I got
order.
I got to do it in the right order.
I do the
so,
same.
So I got through that, and then I probably then started putting more miles in April. April, May, June, July.
What was your typical weekly mileage for a marathon?
Like
before?
For a marathon before, I think.
When you were going faster times and stuff?
40 to 60.
40 to 60. Okay.
Yeah,
and then what did you get to?
I probably was more in the 50 to 70.
Okay.
Or maybe even.
It's
some were
surprisingly not that much
It's not
more.
that much. Someone were like maybe even 60 or 65, but the hours were a little bit more because I was slower.
Yeah.
What percentage was off-road versus on-road?
I would say, as far as days of the week, it was 3 out of 6.
Okay.
As far as time, it was probably 75% or 80%.
So you would do a couple of during the week, just
Yeah.
you show up to like run group. And
Yeah,
do a
run group, do a run couple, 5, 7 miles, 8
Yeah.
miles. Maybe I'd get
Keep it loose, keep it.
something like that. Maybe I tried to Wednesday have a half day of work, so I have the afternoon, and I'd always try to, particularly prepping for Leadville, to try to get out to one of our local parks and do some laps just to be, because I learned before on trail runs, it's like, oh, why is this so hard? It's like, because I haven't been running on the trail.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's
Trails-
different miles,
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
muscles. You know?
Trails teach you to pick your feet up.
Gotta pick
no
your
kidding.
feet
That's
up,
the
hip
big thing is
flexors,
pick your feet up,
smaller steps, lateral movement, all the different stuff. So
Yeah.
figured that out, and then I do like big weekends, Saturday and Sunday.
Were you doing weight training as well, or was it
A
mainly
little bit, but then as I got more miles,
You could.
Yeah.
I just they're just
It's too much.
I mean, I was looking at something in Jason Coop writes a book, Ultramarathon. So he has like
It's
this.
the book.
It's the book. Yeah. So he has this flow diagram that I agree. It's kind of like, should you do weight training? It's like, could you be running more?
Yeah.
Would running more help you run more, run better?
Run more, run
Yes.
Do you know how to lift weights? Do you know how to lift weights and not get hurt? And like you have to see the right answers to all those. And before the end of it, it's like,
just go run?
there's not enough time
Yes.
for me
Yeah.
to do a lot of weight training. But I did more weight training at different times through the winter and
Sure.
some months before. Yeah.
So, recovery is near to dear to my heart. So what was your recovery looking like as you're doing that? Do you try to or are you just naturally gifted and you don't?
Well,
What part, like hamstrings are terrible for me.
Yeah.
Is there a particular thing that you
no,
also
I'd probably, it's probably a weakness. Like
Yeah.
I'd say I could probably stretch more. I think there were probably times training where I probably was overtraining, where you're just like, I feel exhausted.
You're just dragging.
I was like, I'm tired. But I think one thing I've been able to self-regulate is like when it's in recovery, it's just not pushing too much.
Yeah.
I need to take a day off or I had this idea that I want to run 8 miles today, but it's going to be 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh,
I'm
so
a
you're good
walk
with that. That
Yeah,
helps.
yeah.
That helps.
Yeah, so you're a walking dichotomy, which is cracking me up because
Yeah.
it seems like you very much like a program, right?
Yeah.
You like to write stuff down, you like to do research, but you're astute enough to know that just because it says 8 doesn't mean I'm doing 8 today.
Yeah.
Or if it's supposed to be a training day and you wake up to your point, like I think I'm overtraining, that you can say stop.
Yeah.
That's a rare trait, by the way.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
some people have.
Yeah.
The reason why people go see you is because people like me that don't know that it said 8. I did
Yeah,
8. How are you feeling? Well, my calf. blew
Well,
up
it's
and,
and maybe I know this because I've done it wrong
done it
before.
wrong before. Yeah. Okay.
You kind of learn that, and then you
Yeah.
get older,
Yeah.
and then you say like, okay, like
That's
I want to do something in a week, and just filling out
Yeah.
the box on the piece of paper doesn't really.
And as you get
accomplish
older,
goal.
it takes you twice as long, if not
recover,
more,
yeah.
to recover, and it's more devastating at that point. So,
How is your fuel then? I mean, are you generally a clean eater anyway, or is it
Yeah.
something that do you have to like increase the protein? Was it the carb increase? What those things that?
Well, I'll tell
like
you-
for a guy new for me, that's a difficult thing.
Training and I'll say training and then racing
Yeah,
differently.
yeah, we'll get to the racing in a second, 'cause
So,
I'm just worried
so
about
the
the training
training, I generally eat pretty healthy.
Okay.
So like I generally, don't eat much fast food.
Yeah.
Luckily my wife cooks really clean and healthy.
Nice.
So there's healthy stuff around the house. We don't have a lot of junk food and that sort of thing. But at the same time, when you start putting on more miles,
Yeah.
and I'd come off weekends where I did 4 hours on the trails on Saturday and 2.5 hours on Sunday, and it's Monday and I'm ravenous.
Yeah,
And I can say this medically too. It doesn't matter. At some point, it's just you need
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
fuel.
You need calories,
So reaching,
Yeah.
eating bread or,
Yeah.
whatever's in,
You're eating bread.
I'm eating a bunch of bread. Just
This guy.
Hey, with
Yeah, I
anything
know.
on it.
anything. You want to eat something.
Yeah.
Well, and
And-
your engine, I mean, your furnace is just cooking at this point.
Or you finish a big thing and it's like, okay, I'm going to stop and, get a Subway on the way home.
Yeah.
Or,
Is there, I have to tell you, because I know when I'm like, if I do a hard workout or I do a hard run and I'm super hungry, for some reason, fried chicken sounds incredible. Is there a thing? I know fried chicken's terrible. I know that.
Yeah.
But don't tell my body that. It's just like, all I want is fried chicken. Like when I got done with Ironman, half Ironman in Muncie, I think I drank a liter of beer and fried chicken. That was, I don't
Nice.
know why,
I
but
know what you're-
is there like a craving you have? Is there something that,
I think it's interesting you say it, and it's probably different for everybody, but your body will crave what you need. Like if
my
you're-
body needed probably just the fat. Well, I think to your point, I think I'm hypoglycemic when it comes to this because I dehydrated the hell out of myself that day. It was terrible.
If you're hungry, like if you're low on protein, sometimes your body's craving protein, and if it's carbs you need, it's like it's just carbs.
Yeah.
And so it hard for to say. I've never really. I've been very lucky with nutrition in the sense I can digest just about anything.
Yeah.
Lucky.
Yeah, I know I'm lucky, and that's something that's probably an attribute that helps with the 100-mile run.
Oh, absolutely.
Totally.
If you have to put things in a pie graph and say
Yeah,
what do you
yeah.
need to be successful,
Yeah.
if you have a gut that is pretty resilient,
You'll do okay.
that's a huge asset.
Yeah.
Which you can't, that's just
I
what
hear
you're born.
there's back and forth, and people say you can train your gut to do that, to be that way. And it's like, I think there's a certain amount of that, but there's a certain amount of inflammation. If your body gets inflamed, certain people have different responses to that. And you can train it a little bit. You can get used to eating on the run. But I think if you're going to have these big inflammation reactions to things, you're going to get it. Some people are
like, and I guess it's good. This is consistent with my experience professionally. I mean, there's a bell curve of every attribute of human existence.
Exactly.
And like your gut tolerance is one of those. And so anyway.
Well, I think it's I think newer people that even like marathon runners or anybody else, I think they undercall nutrition during a race more than anything else.
Yeah.
Like it surprises almost everybody. I mean, I think that's the trough you have to go through, right? The education you have to go through is like mile 30.
Yeah.
Your body's going to react differently to whatever fuels you thought you were going to do. I remember my first marathon, I thought I would take 7 gels, right? And I was dry heaving at mile 21. Like that's not going to work, right? So you just know, like, I have to take more real food because, but you don't know that until you go through that kind of deal.
You need the experience.
And I can, could add on to that. The longer you are out there exercising, and this is you need more food, and obviously, and even training. Like I'll generally, when I'm not going to be out more than an hour and a half, and even if it's a weekend run with other people, I could go 2 hours and not eat. But I figured out training during this event that if I'm going to be, it's a better training event.
Yeah.
And I feel better if I actually eat a little bit. So if it's going to be more than an hour or hour and a half and you eat a little bit, you consume a little bit of carbohydrate, I feel better.
Yeah. And so what is your, are you more like, when you did the 100 or you do the 50s, is it more like you eat like potatoes with salt on it? Or are you more like liquid nutrition?
Okay. So I'll tell you, I thought about this and again, had kind of a plan, and I guess, and again, it goes back to, and again, this is a, N of one, and it's me, right? I had all these ideas, like I had all this idea with food, and I'll tell you what happened.
Yeah.
Number one is I said, I got to stay hydrated. And part of this is coming off training in Tennessee. Yeah. I got used to drinking so much fluid because, we know it's hot as anything in the summer. I trained all through the summer. I had to drink tons of fluid just to survive a 2-hour run. Right. So I said, well, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have dilute scratch. Like whenever I'm drinking, I'm going to have dilute scratch. So I consumed a lot of scratch energy, which was added up to a lot of calories. And sometimes it would maybe be, if I had a liter of that, I mixed it at it'd be 160 calories of that.
Okay.
Just
about right.
So I was doing that at least every hour, and sometimes a little bit more. So I was getting a lot of liquid energy, which is great, which again worked great for me. I never had any GI issues from it. And then I packed Spring Energy, which I like and tolerate.
Yeah.
And I had a bunch of that. Now, I had also packed rice and potatoes and like a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
As it worked out, for most of the race, I was just doing Spring Energy gel and doing scratch.
Huh.
And then it got like a couple times, if I go, there's different points on this, but there was one point I got a little bit behind. It was like before mile 50.
Yeah.
And then when I got to the aid station, I had Coke and ginger ale, and they had I think they had some potatoes and some other stuff. I just, you basically just throw it in your gut.
These aid stations at these ultras are amazing.
They're amazing.
It's a buffet of just the most amazing foods, and it's great.
It was great. They had, and gosh, there was some fantastic stuff. Now I'm forgetting what it was, but it was anyway. Hope Pass has a fantastic aid station too, which is pretty cool. But so I did that, and then when I got back to my, mile 62 of that race, that's when you have some pacers.
Yeah.
Okay. You can have pacers starting at 62 on that race.
Cool.
And through the rest of it, I just consumed a little bit more, but I had all this solid food, like Fig Newtons and all.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, and I think, like my assumption is I wasn't behind in salt. I wasn't craving salt.
Yeah.
So my assumption is I had done a good enough job of supplementing that with all my energy drinks that I got there, and it's like I thought I'd want all this solid food, but I just wanted, by the end, I wanted Coke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Like,
funny?
yeah,
Because I understand once you open up that Pandora's box, you got it, because you're throwing caffeine.
Oh, I was like,
Yeah.
Coke was like liquid
that
gold.
sugar
and
It's like,
Yeah.
I was like, I remember being on Hope Pass. Do you guys have Coke? And they're like, no, we have. I'm like, okay, that's great. Thanks. Anyway.
Well,
You're not my favorite aid station anymore.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, so when the sun goes down at Ironman, right, is when they get the
broth.
Yeah, the broth out, and
Yeah.
so I lived off of Coke and broth. I'm like, and I'm running with people like, we get chicken broth. We get chicken broth.
Yeah.
And it's like
I think
everyone's
it's
super excited.
awesome.
It's chicken broth. So it's chicken broth Coke.
Yeah.
And it's just I don't know what it is.
Yeah. So my experience was
Could
that,
be salt, right?
that you don't know. Like I had all these ideas.
Yeah.
And then when it came down to it, I
Yeah.
did stay on top of it, so it was
Yeah.
okay. But I didn't.
It's
know.
an interesting thing you say about sodium, though, because I never really thought about that, because you always think about calories, but not necessarily about sodium, because that could be it, right? You start getting hungry, all of a sudden you're sodium
So
deficient. and that helps with absorption too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So here's a good story. What happened? I did a 100K in Alabama in the heat of the night in August as my training race, my B race leading up to it. So it's 4 25K loops. I get out there. It's hot. We're sweating like crazy. I've got a good plan set up. I had done it the year before. I get through the first 25K. I feel good. I'm right on pace, right where I need to be. I'm eating what I need to be, everything. I get out there for the second loop. Before I get to the first aid station, there was 3 aid stations, so every 5 miles, essentially, I start to feel like crap. I mean, like, I'm bonking at this point, but I've been eating and going through stuff, but I realized, looking back at it now, that they didn't have electrolyte mix like they used to at the aid stations. They had Tailwind, which was great because I love Tailwind, but there was no electrolytes. So I barely made it that second loop. And I was like, if I don't feel good, I'm out. Like, and I don't ever want to drop out of a race. I mean, you get lows and stuff. So I come through. I had started taking in salt. I tried to grab everything that I possibly could. I found somebody at the aid station who had salt tabs, so I got those. So I had a bunch of those. So I'm doing this as I get back. I get back where my wife was helping me at the aid station, and I get this BOA stuff that's this hydrolyzed salt, essentially. So I take that with me. I take a few dabs of that, more salt tabs. I'm just chomping the salt at this point because I'm not thinking about it, because this usually kicks me out of it. So now I start to feel good. So I head back out there again. My third loop, I'm killing it. I'm right on pace. Everything's great. And I just keep going with the salt. I figure I'm good. The fourth loop I get out there, before I get to that first aid station, I'm an Oompa Loompa. I'm purple. I'm so swollen. I can't run.
You did too much.
I went way over to the opposite
If a
direction.
little bit is good.
And it's
A little
like,
bit more must be
and
good.
it was just, I wasn't paying attention. And I think it was the stuff that I was spraying in, because I was just like, it's like a breath mint at this point. And so I'm going along, and it's still dark, because we start at 6 p.m. and coming through in the morning. And I'm like, I can't flex my hands. I'm like this. As the sun is coming up, my arms are purple and my legs are purple. I was just a big Oompa Loompa. And I was like, oh no, now what do I do? So then it was like potassium. I need a banana and I need a lot of water. I can't eat anything because it all has sodium in it.
That's funny.
So I spent that whole loop just basically surviving to get that flushed out of my system, which took me a little bit longer, added an extra hour probably onto my race to get back to the start-finish line. And I felt better when I got back. But even at the finish line photos, my wife was saying, like, I was going to post a picture of, but yeah, you look a little bloated. I'm like, yeah, I was.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That was really bad. I mean, how bad was that? I mean, is that something like I should have just been like, I'm out?
Well, you're okay here.
I'm here.
You're all right.
I knew how to manage that because I've done enough races where I've gone the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And I know I've gone not quite this far before. I've had experiences with that, and we kind of figured out what to do really quickly. But I mean, that's something to watch out for.
Oh yeah, you have to. Yeah, I think that my take on a lot of that is if you allow there's always a balance here because with eating. You have to, for an ultra event like this, you have to be ahead of the game.
Yeah.
You
have to eat early and often.
You have to eat early and often. You have to be ahead of it. From a hydration standpoint, some of that needs to be thirst driven, I think.
Yeah.
Like if you can, it can be dangerous if you overconsume free water, and you can kill yourself that way.
Yeah.
And then the same with salt too, like this habitual. So I looking back, I think it's from my own experience, the fact that I came in and I didn't want the potatoes with salt and the potato
that
chips.
said you didn't need it.
I didn't need it.
Yeah.
Like that's what it was. But when I saw that Coke there that looked like cocaine,
I want that.
Like I wanted that.
Yeah.
So I remember that.
Caffeine
so
and
much.
sugar, man. It's a beautiful combination.
It was the best. So
Yeah.
So Leadville's at elevation. You're in Tennessee, which is not.
Yeah.
How does one train for that?
Well, what I did. Well, first of all, there's an element, and I'm answering this partly from my experience and partly from my medical knowledge and physiology. Is part of it is. You're never going to be, unless you were out there for 6 weeks and trained, you're not going to be as good as you could be if you were local.
Sure.
Like, so if the three of us were, training an Olympic team and this was an event, we'd say we need our athletes out there 6 weeks before and we need them training in Denver and
you
coming
didn't
up
do
the
that.
mountains. I didn't do that.
All right.
Now, what most of us do is there's two choices. You either go out a day like right before the event and try not to get sick and hope that if you get altitude sickness, you're mostly near the finish line, which I chose not to do, or be more than 4 days ahead. So I went out there, I flew out Sunday night and went up and stayed in Breckenridge.
Okay.
And then just for the week, kind of, I did some reading and chilled out, went on some 3-mile runs.
Kept it real low key.
Kept it low key, hiked,
Little
tried to eat
THC
clean.
to keep you sleeping.
No.
Yeah, we know what you did. Colorado. We know what you did.
Did that.
We know what you did.
And it was great. And I think that, I can only assume that having had 5 nights at altitude made a huge difference because, other than, I can say coming over Hope Pass the second time, which is at 12.6, and it was like mile 55 maybe, I had a little bit of a headache, and I was like, okay, I don't feel good. Is this fatigue, headache, altitude sickness? And at the same time, I'm like, well, if it's altitude sickness, I'm about ready to go down 3,000 feet.
So
and then
that
when I
should help.
did, it was done.
Yeah.
And so that was it.
Oh, perfect.
So I survived the altitude. So that's the answer to that. Is a week ahead. And I think if I had to give advice to someone, I'd say if you can get
If you can do that.
if you can do that, that's huge.
Okay.
Is it dumb question? Is it a similar thing if people are coming in from that are traditionally drier on the West Coast, for example, and you're coming into the South with that much humidity, or is it just you're going to sweat and that's just?
I think the altitude I think is just separate.
Yeah,
Like,
but is there a similar type of thing for people that? Like when we first moved to the South, because we came from California to the South. My kids started doing cross country. They were purple when they came home. Like they just didn't understand that sweat. Sweat. I just didn't know if it's 4 days ahead or not.
Well, what I understand about heat training. So let me kind of talk about this. Is so from a standpoint,
humidity training is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, humidity. The difference with if you're, let's say you're used to exercising in Scottsdale, Arizona in the heat versus Tennessee. Well, in Arizona, you're not going to be soaking wet.
Correct.
But you're maybe sweating just as much or more.
Yeah, it just dries. Well, that's the tricky thing about
That's the
Arizona.
tricky part.
It dries off, so you don't realize it, and
Yeah.
it reminds and so the difference here is just you're soaking wet, sweating. So I think heat training in my mind should be equivalent.
Okay.
Like it's if you're used to sweating. Now if you're doing like a friend of mine in another prep event for this, my friend. I helped pace my friend to the Key West 100.
Oh, that's a good sweaty one.
Yeah, that was super sweaty. Oh. And in fact, side note here, and that was, we talked about, I helped him with some ideas on how to prep, because in Tennessee, it's just April, May, it's not so hot. He had to go down there for an 85-degree heat.
Yeah.
And so he did some stuff to kind of prepare for to be super hot and be trained. And there's some things you can do for that. But gosh, what was I going to say? The one thing that helped me about doing every event helps me. And I think you're making me think of two examples. When I did the Key West one, so I'd go down there. I'd never seen 100 before. This was in May before the August event. And I kind of thought I knew what 100 miles was. When I saw him do 100 miles, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. So, we'd finish the race. Monday, I fly home. He's there with his buddy. They're still hanging out at a pool on Tuesday. They look on Strava. I ran 14 miles. They said, Jeff's scared. And they texted me, and I said, actually, you're right. I came back, and I was like, I am freaked out a little bit. So that's one. And then, so the other thing you said about being hot is I ran a Las Vegas marathon a couple years ago, and it was relatively warm, but it was so dry there. I didn't drink enough. And because I didn't realize how much I was sweating. And
my first Ironman in Arizona was in, I was living in Tennessee, moved to, went to Arizona, and the first thing you think of is like, this is fantastic because there's no humidity. But the second thing you realize is I literally packed 3 chapsticks because you just get dry, right? And it's weird. So I'm like, well, if I put a chapstick in my bike, and that can help on a myriad of things. If my lips get banged, if I get a little rash or whatever, you can do that. But it was just like, you just don't understand like that difference between it. And then when you are going from dry and you come in here, you're just like, you feel like you're trying to run in a swamp, right? It feels like there's a cotton, thing in your mouth that you're trying to breathe through. It's just like, and you just have to adjust for that. So, we've been dancing around the conversation of Leadville, but you're there 4 days ahead. What was the plan going in? What was the
plan? Okay, so I'm there ahead of time. I had some good friends come out on Thursday. We go to Leadville, have a house. It was great. I was with another friend, and how many of us were in the house? Maybe 7 of us total.
Wow.
And it was great.
Nice.
So one guy had done the race 3 or 4 times before. He was a helper. We had a good buddy of mine, another friend that did the keys that was there to pace me, another friend that came in to pace.
So how big was your support crew then for you specifically?
For me specifically, it was 2. My buddy was there, and he had 3 people, and I had 2 people, but we were all kind of together.
Got it.
Yeah.
So
we're all together. So we basically had
it's not like his friend is going to ignore you guys.
No, we had 5
Jeff who? I don't
5
know.
support people and 2 runners.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great.
That's good.
So we did that, got there, and then the race starts at 4 a.m. So that I remember the night before, and this is I ate ate some a bunch of, I guess, spaghetti at about 5 o'clock, right? So it's like 6:30, and it's like, let's go to bed, right? Everyone's like, you should go to bed, try to get some sleep. I remember sitting and staring at the ceiling for about 5 or 6 hours, and then slept maybe 2. And then the alarm goes off at like 1:30 in the morning.
Well, it's a big deal. I mean, this is Leadville.
Yeah, you're like staring like, and I'm sitting here thinking like, all the thoughts that go through your head. You're like, you're excited. You don't want to disappoint. I wonder how well it's going to go. Like, here's my plan.
Is your mindset, because doing Boston's also sort of a, it's a bucket list event. Right before Boston, did you feel the same way you did that, or did you feel the same way Leadville? Which one felt a little?
I think, it's hard to think back to the first one, but very similar.
Was it?
I think, but Leadville was more frightening.
Because of the distance and because like there's so many things to go wrong.
Right? Like it's just like I had listened to people that did it and podcast and
being there and seeing the grandeur of the mountain, the 14,000 footers, and you're all around you is like, wow, it's just mind blowing.
Like it was, there was like an element of like I feel very confident and know what to do, but there was more of this is beyond my control. Like what's going to happen? Am I going to?
This is big.
This is big. Am I going to get altitude sickness? Am I going to roll my ankle? Am I going to get so sick I can't eat? Like I really want to finish this thing. What's the weather report was pretty good.
Good.
So
how prepared did you feel going in? Did you feel like you did enough?
I felt like I did enough. Now, if you drill down and say, could I be Again, this is the balance.
Everybody's
for all
always
of
going to
us.
say that, right?
Yeah,
I always
yeah.
Could have done more.
But you felt healthy.
I felt healthy and well and good enough and in a great place, and the prep was great, and all that was good. Now, I could do more specific training and kind of push your lactate threshold more and all that. But like, it was more for me just about being healthy and well and rested and fit. And
but that wasn't in the back of your head. Like you felt good.
I felt good. I felt like I'm confident to do this. And in fact, part of the thing that was exciting for me is like, I remember in particular, and this was months before there was a Leadville podcast. And I don't know this guy's story that much, but it was all about Drew Peterson. I think Drew Peterson, he's a professional skier. He had finished the year before and he had broke 25 hours. So I listened to his old adventure. And I was like, I think I'm fit enough. I'm not 29 and I'm not an ex-professional skier. I think I am, but not. But I said, I think I could.
You were a mediocre soccer player, though.
Just saying. That's right, I was. But if we went on a long run, I was like,
you were there.
Exactly.
You were the guy.
When the coach says, go run for 8 miles, and everyone goes like, oh, please. And I'm like,
just
come
8?
on, let him talk. Anyway, so I listened to that and listened to his whole trials and tribulation about through the race, and I was like, I think that was like in my mindset. I didn't want to talk about it too much, but my goal in my head was like, and I told my guys, it's like, this isn't about anyone else. So it's not about like the standings or anything. I said, I want to finish number 1. I said, but I think I can beat 25. And I'd like that big buckle.
Nice, yeah.
And so that was
it's a big buckle.
That's huge.
It's a nice buckle.
So that was in my head at the start. And then,
how much does that drive you? Because that drives me way more than it should, right? Because everyone like, well, I just want to finish. You're like, no, you don't. I mean, you do, but there's always a number in your head, right?
I think, for me, I think there has to be whatever it is, like whatever your benchmark is. For me, that was my benchmark. And
I think the number's also based off your ability. To your point, like I'm never going to figure out how to do a 25. Like when I went into the half, I'm like, I should be able to keep this pace because I know during my training plan I kept this pace.
Yeah.
So when I start doing math, I'm thinking, okay, I should be around this number.
Yeah.
And then where it goes or where it doesn't go. So there's always a number there. So 25 was a magic number.
That was magic number. And again, it's kind of
and it's a belt buckle.
And it's a big buckle.
It's the bigger buckle. I get it.
Come on.
Totally.
Sashay into a restaurant in Denver with that bad boy on.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
You're not buying drinks. Look at that buckle. Get this man a drink.
It's so huge.
Put a scorpion in it. He's a 25-hour man. So anyway, so you toe the line. You're 4 a.m. It's the 25's in your head,
and then thing goes off.
Yep.
There's I think 826 people started. I remember that number.
And they talk about it's a shotgun blast that goes off, and they
that's freaking awesome.
They talk about they pack the shell with a little extra powder, so it gives a little more oomph.
Little
and
juice.
it's just
Because Ken Klober,
Ken's the guy,
shuts it off, and then Mary Lee, she's the one at the finish. They said at the pre-race, they said, basically it's really simple. When the gun goes off, you start running, and when Mary Lee puts a thing around your neck, you can stop.
So
I like that. Any questions? No, we're good.
That's it.
Go that way.
So we start
climbing.
And if we, I guess.
What elevation do you start?
You start at 10.2.
Okay.
So you 10.2, and then kind of on a road out of town. Oh, and one thing, let me full circle to this is my third year residency in 2003 in February. I did a rural rotation where I spent 3 weeks working at the hospital in Leadville.
Oh,
there you go.
So I was like at a clinic.
So there's a kind of
worked in a
connection
hospital.
there.
So a little bit of connection. And small hospital, and just, I'm sure it's expanded and been purchased and so forth. But one side was the acute care, and the other side was the like assisted living or nursing home.
Okay.
So that's how small it was.
Yeah.
Two things. So anyway, I kind of knew about the way back. So this was full circle for me.
Yeah.
And my first marathon was at Steamboat, which is
so
not far
you're
from
right
Steamboat,
there.
Colorado.
Yeah.
So I said, and I kind of joked with some friends. I said, this is a great story because it's 20 years, and if something happens to me, it's a great bookend of my career. Right?
Yeah.
20 years later, he goes back to Colorado, and that's
it. Yeah.
We want
If
to
it goes bad, we just wheel him into the old folks section of the hospital.
Acute?
So-
No. Yeah, over here.
Started off, you had like a couple out, you kind of go out of town, then you're on a dirt log, like kind of a dirt road. You kind of, it's a little bit of down, there were sections that we were hiking up really steep stuff.
Yeah.
And I just I tried to go easy and laugh. And I just laughed. I was like, this is we're at mile
For sure, in a
6,
logjam
and
of
I'm
people.
like a logjam of people, and I'm hiking up something that's so steep. My
Yeah.
heart rate's really high, and I'm like, this is crazy. So then we have to go around Turquoise Lake, like 5-6 miles to maybe the first plane you see your crew is at 12.5. You get around Turquoise Lake. So you get this long section. And what I'd read before is like, just get comfortable. Don't spend time trying to pass people. It's a waste of effort. Yeah. And I did, and it was good. And we chatted with people, and we talked, and
that community is really nice, right? Everyone's pulling for each other.
They're super friendly.
It's fantastic.
It was great. Like I saw Dean Carnazzi's at the expo.
Nice.
And I said, can I get a picture with you? And he said, I read your book like 10 or 15 years ago. And he said, and you still like me? And you're here today?
Kinda.
Yeah, kind of.
But to respect you anyway. How's that? Let's just keep it to that.
So that's pretty cool. So got around to the first thing, 12, that's when you start seeing your people, and it was excited. It's a big aid station. Because so for a race like this, every 15 miles you see people. So there, stripped off some stuff, got rid of the headlight, and then had another section, had to go over Sugarloaf Mountain, so 1,000 feet of elevation, was doing this scoot, trying to figure out how to run, walk, and then came around down that. You've heard Power Line is kind of a famous climb. I'd go down that. It's like 1,800 feet of steep downhill. And then you get to your group at 24 miles, we're Outward Bound, which is the next spot. And I remember coming into there, I saw Sally McRae, Yellow Runner. And like, I was like, oh, wow, Sally. Like, I almost stopped to like get a picture, but it was too creepy. Even though in retrospect, I should have stopped.
She would have been
Sally,
fine.
I love you. You're so awesome.
Yeah.
I said, I'll see her later, but then I didn't see her later. I think she was there pacing someone. So my buddy's there, and it was great because we had, like, since we had 5 people and 2 of us, like, and my buddy was behind me, so there, we kind of all helped each other. They were putting my stuff and getting me taken care of, and then off.
Nice flex there, by the way.
What?
And my buddy's behind me.
wow.
Just so you know.
Just so you know.
Just so you know.
Well, we were,
he's back there.
We weren't we weren't together. So anyway, so we.
So you're on pace for your 25.
Yeah,
at this point, right?
and I really wasn't. Yeah, and I had looked at my pace thing, and they said, Jeff, you're fine. I had found a pace thing, and I was like, I wasn't really looking at it much, but then when I came in, I looked at it. I'm like, okay, I'm
pleasant
ahead.
surprise.
Pleasant surprise.
You're
I'm
feeling
happy.
good.
And mostly it was like I was completely at that point, and I can say I was completely, and I can't remember the numbers now, but I had done, like, I need to consume 3 500 milliliter things of scratch. I need to do this many spring energies. I need to come in with this many calories, because I was kind of figuring 250 an hour for me. And so I was on pace. And then the next section, when you go from there up until 38 is Twin Lakes, as you go up, and you're kind of next to Mount Massive and Mount Elbert. Mount Elbert's the tallest peak in Colorado. Wow. And you're up kind of aspen forest, single track. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Just cutting the edge of
I mean, it's beautiful. And I remember one time, the only time I fell in the race, so I met this other guy, I think his name's Garrett, and we were talking, and he's like, yeah, I met Sally. So a woman. So message up. So he says, yeah, took a picture with her, had a great conversation with her, and he pulls his phone out of his pocket. I fall and like scrape up my hand. I'm bleeding. I'm like, well, that's okay. This is the worst thing. And then he is trying to look at his pictures to show me a picture of him and her together. He falls. And I said,
Sally.
I said, I think,
maybe we'll save this for the end of the race.
I said, I don't think we should look at the phone while we're at mile 35 of this race. So anyway, came into Twin Lakes and with my guys, and the whole group was there. It was exciting. They said, Jeff, you're doing great. I said, I feel wonderful. Good. And one thing I say I learned that I had never experienced with is, for that race, there's periods where you're running flat, hiking uphill, running downhill. And I recognized by this point in the race, I was running a lot of flats and uphill, and then I started running downhill into Twin Lakes, because you kind of come up from maybe 1,000 feet and go down to 9,200 maybe. And I was looking for my muscles. I said, I can't wait to hike uphill. Because at Twin Lakes, you had to run across a meadow for a couple miles and then do 3,500 feet up to go over.
You're one of the few people that say that, by the way.
I know. It sounds
it's counterintuitive, but
it is counterintuitive, but it's because it was more muscular. Yeah. It was like
You just need to activate the other muscles.
I need to activate other muscles, because
once
I started hiking, I was like, this is comfortable. It doesn't hurt as much because I'd been running so much up to that point.
Downhill.
So, I got good news. It was a little warmer than average, but coming from Tennessee, and hike and train in summer, it wasn't hot by any means. Maybe it'd be nicer. But the good thing is there were no storms.
Yeah.
So when I came into mile 38, I was like, do I need my rain jacket and my rain stuff and all this? And they said, Jeff, no rain.
And you packed for all of that.
Yeah, I had all this stuff.
Is there I don't, both of you on this one. I think socks for you is a big deal. Are socks a big? Is there certain?
That's what I was going to talk about. Your feet. What'd you do for foot care?
For foot care, what I did is I lubed them up, had good socks, good shoes, and then when I got back at mile 62, I stripped that off, and they wiped off my feet, re-lubed them, new socks, and a different pair of shoes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I switched.
So you've got an out. This is an out and back.
Yeah.
And there's no water crossings.
There was a water crossing.
There was one.
There was a water crossing. So I left at Twin Lakes.
Okay.
Where I left.
Okay.
Crossed some water.
Yep.
Short stream. So I got wet.
Yeah.
Hiked up the hill, and then I got wet again. And then when I came back into Twin Lakes 2, which is the second time there, that's when I did my change.
That's perfect.
I was wet, and I was like, this is a great time. And I ran the first half with Saucony Peregrine 12s, and maybe I was working on some blisters on the inside of my feet. I switched to Nike Zagamas, and I think
that's unusual.
Yeah, I switched. Those are softer shoes, and I knew I'd be walking more in the last portion, and it was a great deal to switch shoes.
Yeah,
because it wasn't rubbing.
Yeah.
And
I've never because usually it's just like the same shoe, right?
Yeah.
Or a dryer. That's interesting.
I switched shoes the first time I did it. I had to switch shoes because my ankles were getting beat up. My ankles.
But was it a completely
swelling.
different shoe?
It was an older model of the same shoe.
Yeah,
but it was like a completely
unique.
different
I've never
shoe.
heard.
Yeah,
you just
I had to at that point. For this last race, I had the same shoe. I switched shoes once after a whole section of water crossings in the beginning.
Interesting.
I switched shoes, but it was just the same model.
And for me, this was planned. But in retrospect, switching the shoes changed all the pressure points, and I had no problems.
Yeah.
So anyway,
it's cool.
Yeah, so that was
That's
kind
a
of
good idea,
like there was a lot of things that went well, and that was one. So I go up this thing, and I can think of two. Like there were two moments in that race that were really difficult in like the mental stuff. And I was going up. I was halfway up Hope Pass the first time. I got a trapezius spasm so bad that I couldn't use my pole on my left side.
Okay.
And I had thank you, Drew Peterson, who was the skier. He said one of the mindset things he said is you always have to believe it's going to get better.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, what do I do? Okay, so I just left my left arm hanging.
Let it relax.
Hiked the rest of the hike uphill with my right.
Yeah.
And I told myself, well, by the time I climb up, go down, and ascend this again from the other side, which is going to be hours from now, it's going to be better. Yeah. And whether it was true or not, that's what I told myself.
Yeah.
And it was.
Yeah.
And so that worked. And then, cover the pass. It was come down. Went again. Another thing about ultras is I didn't study the map quite as well. I thought I'd come down. This was like massive disappointment. So I get to the top, and I was like, okay, all you got to do is descend the hill. So I descend a couple thousand feet, and I'm like, okay, where's the aid station? I was behind on food.
Yeah.
And it's like, 4 more miles. You gotta be kidding.
That's rough.
That was tough. So that was my second point, which I was behind on food and behind on water.
Yeah.
But I was like, I just got to get there. So when I got to the aid station, and the other thing that helped is right about 4 miles out, I saw all the leaders come by.
Yeah.
And when I saw the leaders come by, again, it makes me laugh in retrospect. One guy was walking with his hands on his knees.
Yeah.
Another guy was like spraying himself in the stream, and I'm like, okay, these guys are hurting.
Yeah. And everybody hurts. Yeah.
And I'm like, these are the ones they did 17 hours,
Yeah.
and so they weren't skipping up this hill.
Yeah.
They were. So got there, turned around, came up Hope Pass the second time, which is so like soul crushing. It is so hard, like to go up. The backside of Hope Pass is super steep. It's, I was maybe 2 miles an hour or something like that. And I was doing
lugging up.
I was doing as well as I could.
Yeah.
It came down the bottom, had this moment where I said, okay, this is the last moment before I'm running with friends. Started running with friends. I came in, so my buddy was having a harder time. So this is where having the right guys there. It was the best group of guys.
Yeah.
They said, Jeff, I had one guy that was going to pace me the last 38. I think he figured out that running in altitude wasn't his aptitude. So they said, Jeff, you're on fire. You got 3 pacers. We split this up.
Cool.
Rob's going to go, David's going to go, and Vance is going to take in the lead.
Yeah,
so I said, Vance. I said, great. That's wonderful. I'm so happy. So I had each of them, and then and then I ran walk, and then as it got further, when I got on this going up, once I got about mile 80 and it was dark, I have to tell you another thing that I did wrong. Like a lot of things right, but one thing I did wrong is I wear contacts.
Oh.
And right about, this is, 10 p.m., midnight, they were so dusty.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
I could not, like it was fine hiking uphill.
Yeah.
But once I came over Sugarloaf Pass, it's like maybe mile 85. And I was like, this is great. We got a forest road, 3% downhill. I can make up some time. Started trying to run. I could not see the contour of the dirt.
Oh, geez.
And so I
Were you wearing a headlamp or did you have a waist lamp?
I was wearing a headlamp. I had a headlamp.
Okay.
But it was the contacts.
Yeah.
So when I got to the final aid thing, I spent about 4 minutes, and gosh, it was the most painful thing.
To try to pull them out.
I took some out and put a new one in. I had one good contact.
So you run with it.
And then
One-eyed Jeff here.
And then so did a lot more walking. I wanted to break 25, so I slowed a little bit in the last bit. Part of it was a strategic conservative approach, because when I started running, and again, I can't blame my contacts. I was tired as anything. And you're not coordinated, and it's terrible. I was tripping, and it hurts. So I slowed down. I just kept telling my guys, I'm like, am I on pace? And they're like, Jeff, you're on pace. It's okay. Just keep walking this pace. I was walking pretty quick. And but another thing happened again. I still am friends with this Vance. I'm still friends with him. Even though some people would say you shouldn't be. We're like 3-4 miles from the end. We took a wrong turn. And this is like middle of the night outside of Leadville. I ran 0.8 miles out of the way. We get to the top of this hill, and I'm like, there are no flags.
You
We're
went
in the
up
wrong
another
space.
hill.
That four-way turn back there, we did the wrong turn.
Oh, my God.
And so here's, again, another interesting thing about the mind. I turned around, I said, we're going. And I started running sub 8 miles.
I was going to say, adrenaline is a beautiful thing.
I started running.
I
dropped him. I dropped my pacer. He's like, Jeff, I can't run this fast. I'm like, well, keep up. And I'm like at mile 98.
You're like, tough shit. We're
going.
We're a mile and a half off, right?
Because I was scared. And then once we got back on, and then I finished, and it was amazing.
I'm sure
I
it's
finished.
epic.
And it's 24:42.
Nice.
Another half a mile.
Congratulations.
The wrong way.
I know, and with a little bit extra time. So really,
10 minutes.
But so 24:42. And the interesting thing, full circle, that podcast I listened to with the skier, he finished like 10 minutes behind me. I just saw. I mean, I didn't meet him. I wish I would have met him. But I looked later.
Awesome.
I was like, I would have said like, thank you.
24:42. You got the big buckle.
Yeah, because he came in at like 55 or something, like to break 25 again. So anyway,
that's awesome. So you got the buckle.
I got the big buckle, and then I had got the big buckle. Felt great and excited at the finish line. Took some pictures, and about 10 minutes later, vigorously started to shake.
Body temperature no longer. Isn't that weird? Your body just can't regulate body temperature.
Like it was in the low 40s, and immediately one of the guys grabbed me. I said, I need to be in a car. They took me a car. I warmed up, slept 45 minutes. So we went back home. We were all like, let's have a beer, let's hang out. Okay, so I sit in the shower for a while, warm up. I get out of the shower, I'm like, no way, I need to sleep. It's 6 a.m. So I go to bed, wake up 45 minutes later, hacking up dirt. I felt like
it kind of makes sense.
I hacked.
It's so dry.
Yeah, like for 3 minutes,
so
like
dry.
2 or 3 minutes, I hacked, and I was like, this isn't good. And then it ended, and I never did it again. And then that was
kind of cleared your
on the
lungs
way to
out.
recovery, and now I'm so thrilled, and now I don't know what I'm gonna do next.
You got to figure out 24. The interesting thing about when listening to you guys, it's not that it's not that you have knowledge or education of the good race. It's knowledge of education when the race doesn't go well. Right. How to course correct. It's sort of like good golfers aren't perfect shot hitters, right? I mean, Tiger is a fantastic golfer because he can hit out of a rough, right? You guys are trying to, it's the exact same thing. It's not, I can put together the perfect race. It's if the race goes wrong, how can I course correct, get back to it?
And
Keep
it
your
will
mind,
go wrong.
like, don't freak out, right? Just kind of put it back. Okay, how do I fix it? How do I trust that the stuff that I've known in the past is going to be doing and be able to do that? So kind of the last thing before we go here is like, so if you have, when you talk to people that are doing, marathons or 50Ks and they're saying, hey, we want to, kind of go up to that next notch, what's your kind of advice that you tell those people?
Like I'd say learn from other people, and you know, incremental goals.
Yeah.
Get Jason Koop's book.
Yeah, I think listening to other people, incremental goals, and kind of like a step ladder approach.
Yeah.
And then you just have to figure out what's right for you. And you
like
know,
you said, you can read all you want, but you have to listen to your body.
You have to listen to your body and figure out what's right for you, and you know, whatever. And like it helped me for me that I'd done like several 50Ks and made some mistakes.
I think that lead up of, we call them B races, right?
Yeah.
B and C races, I think, are highly critical, that you can test all sorts of clothing, nutrition.
You want things to go wrong on a 50K.
That's right.
Yeah, those are the ones
Learn
that
the
you're
mistakes on
okay
those.
with, right?
Yeah.
Have it go wrong, DNF it, whatever. Just figure out, test things out.
And you got to go slow, and it's just got to be patient.
Yeah.
And I think, like, for me, kind of the exciting thing is the idea of you have to be positive, and you have to control your emotions.
Yeah.
And like, I think of moments in there where it's like, okay, I hurt. Now, if I'd gone down a spiral of negativity, I could have given up.
Yeah.
Easily.
Easily.
Yeah.
But you have to believe that.
Yeah.
And then just adjust. You know, I could have had a very different response to my vision.
Yeah.
And I said, well, no, I'm just gonna go slower.
Yeah.
Because I can still walk fast with my poles.
You're still moving.
I'm still moving.
Yeah.
And it's a little frustrating, but gosh, there's worse things to have happen.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
So,
yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
So anyway,
That's great. So thank you so much. I mean,
Yeah.
this is great. Congratulations.
thank you.
I love that race. That's
We'll have to
one I'd
post the
love to do
buckle,
sometime.
too, at the end of this.
Oh yeah, we need a picture of the
Okay,
buckle.
we'll
We
need
need
to
that
post
for sure to put up.
See,
on there.
if I had it here, I couldn't sit down.
Yeah, that's how big the buckle is.
How big it is.
Why is he sitting like
Yeah,
that?
it's like, well, I got the buckle on. You know, we'll get the belt and we just
Yeah, there you go.
wear it across like the
Wrestlers,
wrestlers type
No, it's
thing.
fun.
But
Well, thank you guys because
Yeah.
having anyone that'll listen to me talk about this is pretty exciting.
it's
pretty
hard to
exciting.
find people to do that,
I
right?
know,
My
like
wife just rolls her eyes. Just
I
like,
know.
okay,
I
here he
know
goes
they all
again.
left. I'm just talking myself.
Another cool thing is like, hey, man.
Look at the time. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Congratulations
All right.
again. Everyone, thanks for listening and checking in and watching us on the YouTube channel. Keep the comments and questions coming, and give us the 5 stars and thumbs up. That helps the algorithms and helps everybody find us. We've been getting a good bump up recently, so we appreciate everybody for listening and checking it all in. So until next time, we'll catch you up.